The views and opinions expressed on Coffee Incompatibility are those of the podcast host and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of ASHI.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Coffee Incompatibility. I am Eric Weimer, and with me, as always, with the super awesome background, so please check us out on our new YouTube channel, Dr. Kelly Hitchman and Mr. Jeremy Sherrill. How are you guys doing? Happy New Year!
Happy New Year! Happy 2025. It is starting off interesting, shall we say? But we at the podcast we're on the positive side. We're cooking. We're doing lots of big things. We're moving. We're shaking. We have goals.
Yeah, that's the way we like it.
Great. It's gonna be great.
Never boring.
No. Do you
Who's going to reveal the theme for this year?
Oh, the theme of this year?
The reveal. Do it. Kelly, okay. Dr. Hitchman seems very excited right now.
Here it is.
I love the theme of this year. So we listened to all of your feedback from last year. You sent in such amazing feedback, dear listener. So hands down, without question, 2025 is the year of the listener. It's your year. It's all about you and what you want to hear about and the guests that you want to see and everything that you mentioned to us. So we are cooking up a fantastic lineup for 2025 that is all about you. It is the year of the dear listener. All the things that you said in 2024 you would like for us to dig into in 2025. We're going to do our best to hit the good ones.
It's also the year of the YouTube channel, right? I mean, is that fair to say?
I think it is fair. I think it's
the ASHI HLA YouTube channel. So we are, if you haven't listened to us, we know so many of you listen to us on Spotify and Apple Podcast, wherever you listen to our podcast. Thank you for tuning in. But we are also on YouTube. If you need that, that visual, the picture to go with the faces,
you do.
You know, the picture to go with the voices. We are on YouTube. The channel is called ASHI HLA, and if you go to the YouTube channel and look at the description, you are going to find an exclusive coupon code to get 10% off at the ASHI store. And while you're there, jump into the description, get that coupon code, and then subscribe to the YouTube channel. Just subscribe.
Yeah, we've got a goal. Our goal for 2025 is 1,000 subscribers. Very reasonable goal. You guys can do it. We believe in you. And when you subscribe to the to HLA, to ASHI HLA on YouTube, it's not just Coffee Incompatibility that you're getting access to.
That's right.
It's all of the content that is posted to the ASHI YouTube page by ASHI, the least of which is Coffee Incompatibility.
And we have some incredible guests lined up for 2025, so you're going to want to tune in.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what we actually come up with, and I'm one of the hosts. This is going to be fun.
It's mysterious. It's exciting. It's wonderful. It's going to be a great year because no matter what, listener, it's all about you. It's all about you. So hang tight for just a moment. We're going to take a quick break. We are back with your ASHI president, Cathi Murphey, who's going to talk to us a little bit about the final changes to the CMS final rule.
ASHI membership unlocks exclusive access to ASHI University, a hub featuring over 70 online educational resources offering CE credits and professional support. Members enjoy discounted registration to ASHI meetings and may qualify for travel and registration funding through the Travel Award. Membership includes access to Human Immunology, ASHI's leading scientific journal, along with other resources like ASHI Quarterly and various research articles. Participate in ASHI-hosted meetings and initiatives, connect with peers, and stay informed with the latest updates as an ASHI member. Ready to join? Your membership is just a click away. Visit www.ashi-hla.org and click the Join button in the top right corner.
Welcome to today's episode, everybody. Today, we are so excited to welcome your current ASHI president, Dr. Cathi Murphey. She is the director of the Histocompatibility and Immunogenetics Lab here in San Antonio, Texas, Southwest Immunodiagnostics, and she brings over 30 years of experience in histocompatibility and immunogenetics to the field, to the presidency. She is committed to ensuring that every member's voice in ASHI is heard during her presidency, and we are so grateful and thrilled to have her here today to discuss the future of ASHI from a very important regulatory perspective. We're going to dive into the recent CMS final rule changes. Let's just jump in. Before we start, we should be calling you Madam President, but may we call you Cathi?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me today. I'm very excited to be on your podcast with this illustrious team.
Thank you so much. Oh, thank you so much. It is so great of you to come on to discuss what has kept lots of folks in our specialty kind of on pins and needles since the end of 2023. Just to kind of recap some of those big goings on at the end of, I think, 2023, CMS put out its draft of the new final rule, new CLIA regulations, which garner all the practices for our laboratory. Can you kind of recap for us what aspects of that proposed final rule were the most important or the most concerning to the ASHI community?
Yeah, Kelly. So there were several that were very important. Probably the most problematic were the personnel changes related to the laboratory directors. But one of the best changes that came out in the final rule was the virtual cross-match, and finally being ruled that the virtual cross-match could be utilized in lieu of a physical cross-match. So that's a game changer for our community and allowing us to do something legally that we've actually been doing for a long time. So the personnel changes to the laboratory director has wide effect for a lot of people in our field. One of the major changes was that foreign MDs, unless they have a PhD, are not eligible to be a U.S. laboratory director without training in without having a current medical license in the state that they are practicing. So if they don't have and are not a licensed U.S. physician, then they're not eligible to be a HLA laboratory director. Now, if they have a PhD, then they can be considered under the PhD tenure track. But just because they have the MD does not qualify them as able to be an HLA laboratory director.
So thank you, Cathi, for that. One of the things that you mentioned was sort of final recognition, subtly, because as you mentioned, we may or may not have been doing this already, for the virtual cross match as a final compatibility test for solid organ kidney transplants, that is. Did CMS in their final rule put out any guidance or sort of recommendation on who can perform virtual cross-matching?
No, they didn't. I think that point is still lacking clarity and clarification for, but in their previous documents and statements that they have said that if the guidance or the recommendation that's being put forth is something that a laboratory director would be giving recommendations on. For example, whether or not this patient can go to transplant with this without a physical cross match. If the patient has donor specific antibody and needed yes, they could get transplanted, but maybe you'd want to change the immune suppression afterwards, or maybe you'd recommend post-transplant monitoring starting on day 5. So these are kinds of things that the recommendations that we should come from the laboratory director and not the technologist. But there also is not a lot of clarity around what exactly constitutes a virtual cross-match. So, and I think even within our own community, it's hard for us to decide, is this a test or is this a, or not? So we have to come, I think, to CMS with some kind of guidance of what we think. No, this is not a test. It's a recommendation. If you're utilizing testing information to make this recommendation, does that qualify it as a test? So these are things that even within our own community, we can't come to a clear decision. So I think that we need to do more work on our end in our community for the virtual cross-matching, but they have not really put out exactly who can do the virtual cross-match.
So Cathi, can you tell us, like, when this came out, I think a lot of it was surprising to the community. I think a lot of it we didn't see coming. Can you tell us what it has been like to try to garner clarification from CMS? How does that work? What was ASHI requesting clarification points on, and what worked out?
So that's a great question. So there were several points that we needed clarification on, and the way that we went about asking for this was to utilize our liaison, which is Penny, and I'm blanking on her last name right now, but she has been very helpful in the past, just sending emails. So Melissa Weeks and Chantal, who is the head of the Director in Training program and the chair of the DTRC. So we've been gathering questions. So we made a list of questions of what we needed clarity and clarification on. And then we submitted emails to Penny and Lynette Hollingsworth, which is also our new liaison. And initially, they just kept referring us back to the guidance document that was going to come out. And then as it did, which was almost right before it was implemented. So that was not in quite the time frame that we would have liked to have seen it. But when it did finally come out, there were some things that still were not clear to us. One of them was how the international laboratories, if they were ASHI accredited and they had a director who was ASHI accredited and had ASHI board certification, would this international director be qualified to direct a laboratory in the United States? Well, they finally came back to us with guidance on this, and they said if the director did not train in a lab that does testing for US samples, in essence, has a CLIA license, and they are the director of record on the CLIA license, they are not qualified to direct a lab in the United States unless they get the additional training, the 4 years in a CLIA laboratory. So that was very disappointing to us because we were hoping that they would recognize the ASHI accreditation and ASHI certification to allow these laboratory directors to direct labs in the US. So they did say that if they were already directing a CLIA lab, and I think that there's one in Toronto that actually does testing for samples in the United States, then they would qualify as long as they don't have a break-in service. And if they had the break-in service, then they would need to qualify under the current regulations. So one of the things that they did define that we were very happy to hear is what a break-in service meant. That was not clear to us. Could it be 1 day? Was it, a year, 5 years?
Yeah,
or
it's a lunch break, right?
Exactly, but not quite. I mean, they were so when they put out the final rule, it's the break-in service is defined as 6 months. So if you don't have a break-in service for more than 6 months, then you could still be grandfathered under the old terms. If you had a break-in service more than 6 months, then you would have to requalify under the current guidelines. So we did need clarification on, and they did state that they are, I think, still looking at the foreign MDs that were already directing laboratories in the United States at the time the final rule went into place, and if they were CLIA on the CLIA license as the laboratory director of record, then they could be grandfathered. If they were not, then it's not clear to us whether they're still going to be grandfathered or not. This affects about 4 or 5 individuals in our community, so we're still waiting to hear how they're going to rule on that.
Really, really consequential stuff. And so all of this went into effect December 28th of 2024, right?
That's correct. That's correct.
Right. And the guidance didn't come out, I think, until probably less than a month prior to that date, the guidance that was promised.
I think it was in December.
Interesting. Interesting.
So Cathi, there are undoubtedly going to be questions about these regulations, right? About how they apply in different circumstances and whatnot. Who should people contact if they have a question about these regulations? Should they all be flooding your inbox? Should they be, who should they be contacting?
Yeah, they're more than welcome to contact me and Melissa Weeks and Cathi Giovitsis at ASHI, and we will try and find out the answers to these questions. We are working on trying to get more guidance on answering some of the questions, but I think that the last time they referred us to another office, so another government agency or government email address so that I don't think that Penny and Lynette were going to be able to answer any more of our questions directly. So I'm not sure what this is going to look like and how long it's going to take to get these types of answers. But I also think that maybe some of the answers will come when we have our ASHI inspections, and the next time that we submit our ASHI packet for CMS accreditation. So I wish I had more answers on that front, but I guess this is all new for all of us, and we're just kind of trying to get the answers as we go along.
No, I mean, I think you're doing a great job, Cathi. I think there's been a tremendous amount of unknown through the various federal acronym soup that sort of happened to ASHI over the last couple of years, if you will. And, I want to close by touching on your thoughts about where CMS and ASHI can continue to work together, right? Because no matter how we as a society feel about the federal organizations we work with, we have to work with them. And so from your vantage point, how do you see us continuing to collaborate together with them?
I think that's a very important question, Eric. And I think it's not just ASHI, but I think that we also need to involve some of our other societies and people that are stakeholders for these types of questions, and that the more I guess power in having multiple agencies address these questions together, like AMP and some of our other partners, ASCP, that we can make partnerships and alliances and address CMS directly. I think also it's going to be interesting with the new government change that we don't really know if this is going to how this is going to affect what's already gone into place. So I think we live in interesting times, and we're kind of flying by the seat of our pants until we get further guidance. I think that it's not just the CMS regulations that are going to affect, and we don't have time to go into this today, but I think another whole podcast would be on the OPTN modernization and the new things that are coming down the pipeline for that, because they just put out, as you know, the transitional nominating committee, and we have little representation from the current OPTN on that nominating committee. So what the OPTN board is going to look like, and the committee structure, and will we have a seat on the board with the new board? They that HRSA had kind of suggested that they weren't going to have as many board members, that we weren't going to have the same board composition. So does that mean we're going to lose our histocompatibility seat? We don't know. So those are other interesting questions that we probably need to look into in the future. More podcasts.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly more than enough content out there, right? And I want to say, so that everyone at least hears me say it, is there's a tremendous amount of unknown, as you already said, like whether it's the new administration that's taking over, whether it's just resolving some of the questions that existed for the CMS final rules, et cetera, right? And so, Ashi in particular, Cathi, are highly dedicated to ensuring that we get answers and information passed to membership as quickly as we can.
And one thing I'd just like to also say is that we've tried to keep our community and our members up to date by the town halls and by email blasts. And as soon as we know things, we try and spread this information out to our members so that they know as much as we do, as soon as we do. So we're hoping that to try and keep everybody up to date as quickly as possible.
And as we deal with more and more changes in government regulation, I think it's important to consider, Cathi, if you'd be willing to run for office, you've got my vote. I'm just going to throw that out there. You take that and do with it what you will. But what is the most important ongoing question or unresolved question that we're trying to get answers on? If there's one pressing issue, what would that be?
I think it still surrounds the laboratory director qualifications. They've clarified some of the non-traditional routes, but it's hard to interpret, what in looking at, so now everybody has to submit their transcripts along with their diplomas, and trying to looking at these classes, and do they count? Do they not count? Is this the appropriate type of transcript? Do we have, what counts for the non-traditional route of qualifying for laboratory director? So I think that these are ongoing questions that haven't been answered yet. And I think that maybe will only be answered over time and more experience. But I think as far as ASHI members, that's probably the biggest undecided factor yet.
Well, I know for sure that you at the helm of ASHI leadership and the ASHI executive board and staff will keep after it. I know that you'll keep us updated. Thanks to you and to the staff for sending out that clarification email. There was a blast email, I think on the 22nd, in 22nd of January, sent out kind of summarizing, I think, some of these points that were clarified. Thank you so much for all you do for our community and for keeping us up to date on all of these very fast-moving changes.
Well, you're very welcome. And again, if anybody wants to reach out to me for anything at all, I mean, suggestions, ideas, recommendations, feel free to do so. I'm sure my email address is out there somewhere.
You bet. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having me so much. I really enjoyed it.
Welcome back, guys. It is time for The Tea, a segment dedicated to answering questions from our listeners. This question comes to us from Lakeisha Jefferson. Thank you so much for this question, because I'm just going to put it out there right now. I do not have an actual answer for this question, but it is so important. So I am glad you asked. And Lakeisha asks about technologist burnout. How often is it happening? What are labs doing to address it? And why are some technologists choosing to leave the field altogether? So important. Burnout in medicine in general and clinical laboratory science, histocompatibility, immunogenetics is all part of that. Burnout is so high in our field and all other medical fields. And it hits the technologists so hard, because they are fighting so hard at the behest of our patients who come to us in really emergent fashion. And the technologists are there to help out, no matter the time of day or night. And that can absolutely take its toll. I definitely see burnout in my lab. Something that we did, and again, these aren't perfect solutions. They're not solutions for every group. Something that we did is we offered our technologists 4-day work weeks with 10-hour days instead of a typical 5-day work week, to give them like a 3-day weekend. When I'm on call for consults and virtual cross matches, I really try to respect the free time of the technologist and balance, the needs of patient care with the personal time of the technologists. I really try to not call them in unless it's, really, really, really necessary. And I try to always let them know that I'm on call with them. So if they're in and on, I'm in and on. They're not alone, and they don't need to feel that way. I don't know. What do you guys think? This is such an important topic.
Yeah, I think it's really difficult to give an answer, and I don't think there is an answer, like you said, because every lab provides different service on a different time frame. And so I think leadership really needs to be creative in thinking about not only how to make sure that team members have enough time off, but also that their time when they are in the lab is manageable time, right? What's the experience like when the technologists are actually just in the lab working? Are they are there enough staff? That can contribute to technologist burnout. Not just how much are they working, but what's the quality of those hours when they are working. And so I think that plays into it. So I think people have to be creative about work models, and I think people have to be creative about ensuring that the quality of the hours when staff are in the lab are manageable, that it's a manageable experience.
Yeah, and it's hard to, I think, for probably us to understand the scale at which this is happening, which was one of the questions given to us, given that there's not a lot of data we can point to answer how often is it occurring. But we certainly have taken a number of approaches. We also do the 4-day, 10-hour shifts for several of our staff members. We rotate people around between different testing modalities. So they're not like always doing one particular test, if you will. And something else that the question was posed to us, right, was why are people leaving the field? And I want to touch on that because I think the field is changing, right? I think with what is going on from federal regulations and the uncertainty and the sort of forcing in line away from the individual sort of interpretation that we've had the flexibility to do over the years, and sort of forcing histocompatibility immunogenetics sort of into the more standard laboratory medicine pathway, which is a square peg in a round hole situation. Don't read that as I agree with it, or I think it's what's being forced upon us, not that I want it to. I think some people feel they've lost that ability to like interpret things and have the individual attention that they've had on antibody analysis, for example, individual risk assessments that they've had over the years. And we really want to encourage that. I mean, our lab in particular, we encourage that as for our technologists. And I would encourage all of the ASHI members to try and continue that so that, we want the really good, qualified, dedicated people to stay in our labs and stay in the field. And I think that's one important avenue we can do that with.
Yeah, and I would really encourage listeners, if you're in this position and feeling burnt out, to talk to your supervisor about it, talk to your director about it, and tell them what you would like to see. They may not be able to do everything that you want, right? Because there are limitations organizationally that sometimes prevent them from being able to implement exactly what you would like to see. But they are likely going to be very interested in your feedback and trying to find something that would make your experience better. And so I would encourage you to think of specific suggestions. Maybe it's something that you would like to see. Maybe it's something fun to improve the morale or the the atmosphere or the teamwork in your lab. And I imagine that most leaders are going to be very interested in hearing that feedback and trying to address it.
Very well said, Jeremy. I think that's really true. Culture and team are super important. You gotta like the environment that you go to every day when you spend so much time there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, right. So important. But Lakeisha, thank you so much for this question. Again, none of us have the answer, but I am so glad you bring it to the forefront because it is a question that I think all of us in our laboratories need to ponder, and we need to look out for each other all the time. So if you need career advice or advice on how to deal with something happening in your laboratory, you can visit our podcast page at ashi-hla.org/page/Ashi podcast, or you can email us at info@ashi-hla.org and write the TEA in the subject line.
Hey there, Coffee and Compatibility listeners. Do you have a technologist that you'd like to spotlight? Nominate them by sharing their story with us. Email us at info@ashi-hla.org for a chance to feature them in an upcoming episode of Coffee and Compatibility. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back in just a few moments to recap our thoughts on today's episode.
Guys, so much change. It is so comforting to me to know that we have Dr. Murphey and all, the Ashi community, really after all of these changes.
Yeah, it's just going to be a bumpy ride for a bit here, right? And I think what's important to me is that we remain engaged as a community so that we have a voice as things are being discussed and talked about, right? So, reach out to the people that Cathi had mentioned and, let your voice be heard so that we can, make sure everything is being considered. So it was great, man. She's awesome.
Oh, she's awesome. But I think the things that she touched on are what, has been so concerned. I mean, these are the careers and livelihoods of our colleagues. And these are some important changes. There were some other important changes in the guidance that I wanted to highlight that we didn't get to linger on. One of those is that you're required to at least attempt to get a pre-transplant sample from all of your transplant recipients. I think from my recollection, that is agnostic of transplant type.
Yeah, I
so
do.
you're
I
supposed
agree.
to get a sample within the day pre-transplant for potential HLA testing. It doesn't say that you have to test it. It doesn't say what you have to do with it. It just says you need to best efforts to get it. And I think the OPTN is going to say that needs to be part of your HLA transplant agreement.
Absolutely.
And I think there was some guidance in the new guidance document about encouraging, not mandating, but encouraging monthly serum collections from transplant candidates. Again, agnostic of transplant type, which for some centers, like for liver transplant, that seems nutty. But again, I think you can just kind of put a statement of the regulation in your transplant agreement. It doesn't mean that you have to do that. You just have to state that is the guidance from CMS and CLIA.
Oh yeah, exactly. I don't know what to say other than, dot your I's, cross your T's sort of situation.
Yeah, I think there will be supportive guidance coming out of the OPTN on that point too.
As you both mentioned, I'm very comforted, I suppose, by the fact that that Cathi and the ASHI leadership are very active in trying to get answers on all of these things for the members of our field, and trying to make sure that we have a voice at the table when these issues are being batted around with the regulatory agency. So I'm very grateful for their efforts.
Yeah, and I want to say Melissa Weeks has put
Oh,
in
yeah.
a tremendous amount of effort, as well as Chantel, in keeping track of these, responding to these, and helping Cathi and the other leadership, have information to properly disseminate. So kudos to all of them.
Yeah, Chantal LaSalle has been invaluable to the community. Her mind for regulatory prowess, and she's very detail oriented. She has just been invaluable to this community in trying to get clarification and disseminating that information to the community. And Melissa Weeks has been the administrative head of this process this whole time. We always have to thank our ASHI staff. We couldn't do anything without them. So Melissa Weeks is outstanding. This is a great point, Eric. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to see how this goes in the future, guys.
Yeah. I don't know if I can, there's not gonna be more, I hope. I don't know.
I need a lot of coffee.
I think it's very encouraging also that they are very obviously reading all the feedback, every piece of feedback that they get from the ASHI community. They're conscious of individual cases where this regulation affects one person in our field here, or two people in our field here, that they're aware of those cases, and they're committed to following up and getting answers for every single issue, even if it only affects one individual or two individuals.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so listeners out there, if you are considering training, being a director in training to become an HLA director someday, look through the guidance document and don't let it deter you. This is a great community. The community takes care of the folks in the community, and it is a wonderful and worthwhile career path.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Till next time. Bye.